So welcome back everybody. Now I will be taking up the topic of logical principle in your writing skills. Okay, whenever you are writing, it has to be definitely logical, isn't it? There is nothing to prove that it can be illogical. Otherwise, nobody will value whatever you have written. Okay, and coherence and cohesion, these are two important things which can be achieved only if your write up is a logical write up. Otherwise it will not make any sense. Okay, whenever a writer set forth to prove his point, what he does, he gives his arguments, है ना? And when these arguments can become the strong point of his write-up, they can also end up in disapproving what the writer wants to say. Sometimes ulta bhi hota hai, not necessarily that whatever he has suggested may just go according to his way. Okay, so therefore it is necessary for the writer to check that his arguments are logical. If he gives some illogical argument, it can only stand against his write-up only. So he should ensure that his reasoning is good, it's free from any error, and the reasoning that he gives can be of two types. One is inductive logic and the second one is deductive logic. Now, what is an inductive? It means an inductive inquiry. That means you are giving all the particulars very clearly. It moves from observation and then analysis of the facts, characteristics, attitude, circumstances, to an inclusive statement or generalization. You are taking step by step and trying to build up your argument. Okay, so the generalization the writer makes gives him the following results. It may describe something, it may classify something, it may show a relationship, or it may compare certain things. So it has to go in a very logical manner. Otherwise, he's not going to derive anything from his write-up. Got it? So on the other hand, deductive logic may, once the inductive process is established, we draw conclusion. We deduce. Deductive means deduction. We try to deduct. So we draw conclusion from what we have already learned from the inductive logic. Okay? If we have proved something by employing the inductive process, we can make a deduction. For instance, if we have been able to argue that for example जो आपके book में भी दिया हुआ है, some of the students, during their examination they start getting fevers, and then their attendance, they start falling short, and they have pain or headaches. So it always coincides with the examination dates, and that is the excuse that they give for not giving exam. So these assumptions are the resultant assertions which enable us to arrive at a deduction that he's trying to fake. He's not actually true. He may be just trying to fake a stomach ache or a headache or illness, because we have derived from the inclusion that has been given earlier, right? So the reliability of a generalization we make while making inductive inquiry can be tested by applying this logic. But we cannot examine its verifiability. Sometimes it may be true that the child has got fever just before the exam. It's not always true. It's not possible to find out whether the generalization is true or not. Similarly, the premises that lead to assertion in deduction cannot be proved true or otherwise also. So logic does not provide us with any rules which can verify, though we can try to find out कि ऐसा हो सकता है. Okay, so however, one must make sure that his arguments are not mad by wrong fallacies, wrong ideas. Okay, now what is an argument? Argument, basically discursive prose, has its core an argument that binds all the elements together. हम लोग day to day, every day we are arguing, we're trying to prove ourselves. So a writer of any piece is basically what he does, he's trying to put an argument. He makes a piece so that he tries to build up a piece argument by argument, trying to prove logically things that he's given in his piece writing. Okay, so the defectiveness of persuasive writing depends on the purpose. क्या पर्पस है आपका उसको, why he's trying to prove, he's trying to persuade something, what he's trying to write up उसको proof भी तो करता है ना. So if the purpose is to win the argument, whether by hook or by crook, the writer may use anything. वो झूठ भी बोलेगा, faulty logic भी देगा, which will not be able to help him. Persuasive writing can also be sometimes dishonest, because here you are trying to just focus on your proving yourself right, and you are supported by wrong argument, flimsy argument, illogical reasonings. Okay, so in discursive writing or speaking, the intention of the person who is a writer or a person who is a speaker is to persuade the person who is listening to him or reading his piece. So he does this by setting out a thesis and then proving it. So the thesis is his theme, his stand on a particular issue that he wants to argue on. Right? So his proof is the evidence that he will give in support of his argument. So this proof or these evidences may be false one, may not be able to give anything. They may not give you any conclusion. They're just a waste of time. So if it were, it would be no use of discussing things, and the writer will mess up with everything. So it has to go in a very nice flow where the arguments are proved in a logical manner. So an argument actually takes shape according to the arguer's point of view. It is not always necessary that a thing or a situation can be viewed from one point only. Everybody has a different perception. Everybody has a different point of view. So different people will have different perception, different point of view. Therefore, their responses will be different to the same situation. So what may be desirable to one person may not be to the other person, right? So you have to take into consideration all these facets. You cannot just go on with one thing in your mind and proving one point only. So a writer will prove his thesis by building his strength of argument, by giving reason in support of his stance, giving evidences in support of his stance. Those reasons, evidences should be valid one. If the strength of these reasons will motivate other to accept them, this will act as a proof. Otherwise, they may fall flat. Okay. Here one must also understand that proofs that he may give are logical, and sometimes he will also appeal to his emotions to the reader. While analyzing argument, one has to find out the sources, whether those sources are internal or whether the sources are external. ठीक है? Internal sources में one second. Sources can be internal and sources can be external. ठीक है? Now internal की बात करते हैं. So studying the nature of the thesis, okay, cause and effect, comparing and contrasting, all of them, these, they come in the internal में ही आ जाएंगे. ठीक है? Internal sources. अभी cause and effect क्या होता है? At times, arguments go wrong just because of false premises or faulty reasoning, or both. False premises also and faulty reasoning also. So argument based on the nature of things yield to generalization, and it actually clouds the issue. उसमें clarity नहीं होगी, with irrelevant and emotional appeals. Okay, so this happens because we assume that a conclusion whose truthfulness is to be proved is true. Now cause and effect, arguing a case by going into cause and effect of the subject under study, one does not depend on the nature of the thing but finding on what caused it. क्यों हुआ ये सब, and what will be the outcome. You are not focused on other things, only the why it happened and what will be the outcome. So discussing a case on the basis of cause and effect, we can deduce that a bad situation can be improved if the causes are removed, है ना. There can be a situation where instead of a single cause there are multiple causes for the situation. So we have to understand that. So whenever there is single identifiable cause, eradicating it may not be possible. Even for multiple causes it is not easy. Okay? So here the argument will be that to improve the situation, one should aim at controlling the effects. Right? Because cause उसका ये हो रहा है तो effect करना पड़ेगा ना, control. So one important thing is here, sometimes multiple remedies are also available. एक solution की जगह पे there are many things that we can do. So अगर आप writer हो, you have to understand layer by layer. You cannot just go on one thing. You have to make a cloth by weaving different types of things together. So what are you going to? There are multiple remedies, multiple stories going on with you. Okay? So the writer's efforts are centered on proving the present situation and what course of action should be taken. Okay? A lot of causes are also called false causes, galat, which make an argument susceptible to fallacies. Right? Sometimes, the argument is prone to gross exaggeration. फालतू में एकदम बढ़ा बढ़ा के बात करी जाती है, historical overstatement, whereas in fact there is nothing like that. So comparing and contrasting means here the role of a contrasting argument is to bring out the difference in things believed to be similar. Trying to bring out differences in things which looks like similar. The function of the comparing argument is to show the reader that things considered to be unlike are not actually. So comparing and contrasting arguments are used where the motive is to make comparative judgment. And neither to prove that something is good, neither to prove that something is bad, nor to offer a solution. So these are very important points. Got it? Now, what are the external? ये तो internal बता दिया मैंने. What are the external sources? External sources of arguments में है argument of authority. What is that? Here जो writer होता है, he offers an argument based on recommendation of a person whom he consider to be a very wise person, very knowledgeable person, a person who is an expert. ठीक है? That is an external source. ठीक है? Because he thinks that person has got the best qualification. ठीक है? So another is इधर यहाँ पे लिखा नहीं है, यहाँ पे मैं लिख देती हूँ. First is argument of authority. Second is use of statistic. Sometime external source में हम लोग statistic means number figures को use करते हैं to prove our point. So that means an argument can be made forceful by using authentic statistics, that is which can lend a persuasive appeal to your argument. अगर आप facts and figure पेश करते हो, so we tend to believe in the maximum figures do not lie, right? Figures do not lie, pictures do not lie. Sometimes we try to present ना, pictures होते हैं, proofs होते हैं. So we give those types of arguments. So in fact, when we rely on opinion polls which are not representative or when rating systems are rigged, figures do lie. ऐसा नहीं है. अभी sometimes अभी EVM machine voting में क्या होता है, अगर कोई जीत जाता है तो दूसरों को बोलता है EVM खराब था, तो उस केस में हम लोग स्टैटिस्टिक पे कभी बिलीव करेंगे? वी हैव टू ड्रॉ अ लाइन डेफिनेटली. So most of the time we assume that the statistic and figures, they do not lie, they are true. But अगर किसी ने rigging कर दी है तो we cannot do anything in that manner. Okay? So but there are times when we support our arguments with the help of genuine figures. करते हैं ना? So these are the reasons. Now there are certain weaknesses and fallacies in the arguments. What are those? What are those? A writer, while arguing his case, must avoid many fallacies like hasty generalization नहीं करना चाहिए, faulty analogy should not be there, false cause should not be there, begging the question should not be there, ignoring the questions should not be there, shifting the burden should also not be there. So an editor has to also keep all these things in his mind, that he has to avoid all these things: hasty generalization, false cause, faulty analogy. So what are these basically? I'll explain each of these terms one by one. Okay, now hasty generalization means a writer resorts to hasty generalization when he has not done his paid work properly. His arguments is based on very small or scanty proof or no proof at all. फटाफट उसने जनरलाइज कर दिया कि ऐसा होता है. Faulty generalization happens because of weak evidences or your emotional setup, कि आपने पहले ही जनरलाइज कर दिया कि दिस ऐसा होएगा. So it should not be there. It is like that means you are not looking at the full picture. You are just generalizing it. You are dealing with the half truth. You are trying to stereotype others. Okay, you are investing a group of people with common characteristics and taking away their individuality. आप hasty generalization में most of the time यही होता है कि individual may be different from the group, but because we are trying to stereotype, हमने फटाफट generalization कर दिया. Second is false cause. This fallacy arises out of taking circumstances as a cause, as one is unable to see more causes. ठीक है. Third है faulty analogy. What is that? उसमें when someone makes irrelevant comparison. Analogy मालूम है क्या होता है? Analogy होता है जैसे यहाँ पे मैंने लिखा winter और यहाँ पे warm clothes. और सेकेंड मैंने लिखा समर, यहाँ पे डार्क क्लोथ्स, यहाँ पे लिखा समर. तो यहाँ पे एनालॉजी से आप अपने आप ही पता लगा लोगे व्हाट विल हैपन. दिस इज कॉल्ड फाइंडिंग आउट एनालॉजी. विंटर डार्क क्लोथ्स, समर डेफिनेटली लाइट क्लोथ्स, है ना. So when you try to draw fault analogy, that means you are not trying to understand the situation properly. You are giving out faulty analogy. When someone makes irrelevant comparison, stretching an analogy beyond its natural elasticity, he is presenting a false analogy. Okay? Now what is begging the question? Begging the question when someone assumes what he wants to prove is true. He is said to be begging the question. He argues in one circle only, saying that things that are in bad shape because he is not trying to prove otherwise. वो एक ही loop में घूमता जाता है. Okay? Another version of the fallacy is known as false or complex question, begging the question. Next is ignoring the question. Means shifting the focus from the topic of discussion to something else which is not related. So one of its type is called argumentum ad hominem. I'll write it for you. Ignoring the question, argumentum ad hominem. एंड इसका ऑपोजिट एक और है आर्ग्यूमेंटम एंड पॉपुलम. ठीक है. व्हाट इज दैट? नाउ दीज आर टू थिंग्स. These are two important things. That means you are ignoring the question. You are shifting the focus from the topic of discussion to something that is not related. Argumentum ad hominem means in this type of argument, it is not the topic that is under attack, but the person who is supporting the idea is opposed. On the other hand, argumentum ad populum, here, it appeals to the basic emotions of the people. उनकी jealousy, hatred, fear, resentment, prejudice, passion, name calling, So all these things, they come under that. Argumentative ad populum. When somebody wants to divert the discussion because of jealousy, because of hatred, because of fear, because of prejudice. Okay, got it? It's important term. अगर नहीं समझ में आया तो again I'll repeat it, but it's very important. Argumentum ad hominem. In this type of argument, it is not the topic which is opposed. It is the person who is opposed, because somebody is not interested in that. It is not the idea. ठीक है? Lawyers, they usually use this argumentum ad hominem while they are examining the witness of the opposite party. ठीक है? Because they are trying to not the argument, it is the person who is opposed. Got it? Now, shifting the burden. Next very important topic here, in which are the weaknesses or fallacies in the arguments, are shifting the burden. Here the writer challenges the reader to prove him wrong. Belief and superstition are very important when you want to shift the burden. Okay? Beliefs and superstitions are very important when you are trying to shift the burden. Now, next point, very important point, is countering and refuting the argument. इसका क्या मतलब हुआ? जो आपका thesis है आपके argument का, it contains the seed of antithesis. While preparing an argument in favor of a proposal, it's very important. It's very, very important that you see the opposite stance also. That means pros तो आप देख रहे हो, cons भी आपको देखना है. Pro argument and con arguments, very important if you want to refute the argument or counter it. अगर आपने opposite side से सोचा ही नहीं तो you will fall flat. So this helps in keeping the necessary tools of proof ready. Knowing the opposite view gives the person to make his ground very strong, which will be, making his argument more stronger. Because it is not enough to attack the reasoning supporting the reader's view. One must build an argument which will demolish the evidence in the convincing manner. This can become possible only by knowing the thesis and also countering it. Antithesis भी मालूम होना चाहिए. ठीक है? This is called Reductio Ad Absurdum. It's a way of countering an argument. It's called, these are all I think Greek words, but still आप लोग learn कर लेना. This is called Reductio Ad Absurdum. ठीक है? It is a way of countering an argument in such a way to make it sound absurd. ठीक है? Let's move ahead. We'll talk about statements now. Whenever you are editing, you should be aware of the fact that the sentences are of different types. Are of 4 types. ठीक है ना? मालूम है ना आपको? Sentences are of 4 types. One is statement. Statements are also sometimes called, they are also called declaration. ठीक है? And then you also have in questions, then you also have imperations. That means you are trying to either in those advice is given or suggestion is given, और सजेशन के अलावा रिक्वेस्ट्स आर. तो ये आपके राइटअप पे इतने नहीं होते हैं. ठीक है? और इसके बाद होता है एक्सक्लेमेशन. ठीक है? नाउ व्हेन समवन डिक्लेयर्स समथिंग, दैट इज अ डिक्लेरेशन और अ स्टेटमेंट. ठीक है? a statement जो आपने बोला, it can be either true or it can be also false. ठीक है? Now, if I say she's a good girl, that's a statement. You are declaring that she's a good girl. Agar if I'm asking how is she, that I'm not declaring it, I'm questioning it. I'm asking. So that becomes a interrogation. That becomes a question. Okay? So in writing, you have to understand how you are going to, make use of all these different types of sentences. So in order to prove one's point, one may assume certain things which are not true, then they are called assumption. In a statement, you don't have to prove. But in an assumption, you are assuming. Because in order to prove your point, you are assuming certain things. Starting with that belief in your mind, you may go and give on reasoning to prove your point. Because it is the assumption that leads to definite deduction. कि हमने assume किया तो इसका मतलब ये हुआ. These are stated assumptions and unstated assumption. हम जब भी केस को आर्ग्यू करते हैं, वन मे नॉट मेक एन अजम्पशन, मे नॉट नीड टू, मे ऑल्सो नीड टू, भाई दोनों तरह से हो सकता है. वी मे मेक अजम्पशन, वी मे नॉट. हाउएवर, we have already seen while discussing an argument, there are some assumption which we believe in and some assumption which we do not believe in. I hope you are able to understand how you can make a story and how you can make use of all these things when you are really getting into writing. This may sound very difficult, but when you are into it, you will be able to. Maybe these are all technical terms. आपको लग रहा होगा कि difficult है, but when you are doing a write-up, all these things are not. They are inbuilt. And we keep on arguing every day. हम लोग झगड़ा करते हैं, लड़ाई करते हैं. We are trying to prove ourselves, right? उस टाइम पे हम लोग ये सब नहीं सोचते हैं. We just continue unknowingly we just do these things. Okay, let's move ahead. I think that's all for today.